Hi, thank you for joining us today. My name is Barb. I'm the founder and the executive director of the Barb Smith Suicide Resource and Response Network. We thought it was important today to bring this message and the story around surviving a loss to suicide. It's a topic that oftentimes is taboo, and oftentimes it leaves people feeling alone. So today, we're going to talk about surviving a loss to suicide. According to Dr. Julie Sorrell, who did a study around suicide grief, she found that there's an estimated 135 people who are impacted by one death to suicide here in the United States. So if we think about in 2019, we had approximately 1,457 individuals who died by suicide. If we look at that number of 135 people who are exposed to that single death, we're looking at over 191,000 people who have been impacted by or experienced a loss to suicide right here in Michigan. So our message today really is that if you've been impacted or you know of someone, to know that you're not alone and it's okay to talk about. Our idea is to destigmatize and open this up for conversation. Suicide grief is complex. People who die by suicide, it's a personal death to suicide. There's no two that are alike. Today, we're going to talk about how someone might survive this loss to suicide. I have the honor of introducing our next guest, who has actually inspired me. Our paths crossed due to tragedy, but our journey together is going to bring hope. Please welcome Julie, and I'd like Julie to introduce herself today and what really brought you here today.
So good afternoon. My name is Julie Hart, and I'm here today to share my experiences and insight after having lost a loved one to suicide. My nephew Ben, who was 20 years old at the time, died on October 6th of 2020.
So it's kind of that group no one ever wants to be part of, isn't it?
Yes.
Like, who ever thought that we could be part of a group called the survivor of suicide? Losing my brother, that's what really brought me to this place today as well. So it's a group that no one ever wants to be part of, or the club we say, and to ever have to wear that title. So I'm very honored that you chose to be here today and to share this message with others. So if you could talk a little bit about Ben and who he was in life, we'd really like to share a little bit about his life.
I was so proud to be Ben's aunt. I still am. And I think that this photo that was put together by his hockey teammates really, in a very succinct way, demonstrates who he was. Tenacious. He had big character, big, goofy, joking young man. He had a lot of composure when he was under stress. As you can see in the picture, he was a hockey goalie, and we know how composed they need to be. Ben had one of the strongest work ethics of anyone I know. Extremely intelligent young man, graduated with high honors from high school and was in the process of getting his degree in mechanical engineering at Michigan Tech University. And brick wall is really a hockey reference, but really, honestly, when I think about Ben's personality and how strong he seemed to be to all of us, that also expresses who Ben was as a person.
I love to hear about who they were in life. You know, sometimes in death we forget about that part of them. And one of the other things that we often learn is after someone dies by suicide, sometimes we start to learn more about who they were and the side of them that we didn't know when families or friends get together and they start to talk about the last few weeks or days. So what are some things that you learned after his death about Ben?
So I would have never known, based on the interactions that I had with Ben, that he was struggling in any way. He was excited to go back to school, got back to school a few weeks before his death. And then after talking, we did realize that he did open up to some of his friends about his struggles with different situations in his life, some family dynamics that were at play that we didn't realize that he was struggling with, because in our eyes he was a very successful young man. So if I would have wanted to know one thing that I've learned since, is that he he was struggling, and I would have wanted him to share that with us, because we would have been there for him in a minute.
Yeah. It's interesting how we all know different parts of people, don't we? And we don't always disclose or share all parts of ourselves.
That's right.
Right? It's like we share a little bit with our parents compared to our friends, compared to our siblings, and in death, it's like putting all those pieces together to sort of make sense of that. I think it's hard sometimes when I bring people back to that moment when we say we knocked on the door or you found out about your loved one's death. And the reason I ask this question is not about dramatizing it, but to really help the audience understand the devastation that families go through after a death to suicide and how complex it can be. And I don't know if you can articulate, but can you explain a little bit about those first responses? Because you talked about with Ben, you had no idea. So it really just, you're going about your day and then all of a sudden you get this news. Can you help maybe understand what families might go through and really normalize for someone who's had that experience, what it might feel like?
It's very hard to put it into words, but I would say it feels like you're in the middle of a cyclone. That you have all of these thoughts and feelings that are rushing in and competing with each other, and you're trying to make sense of it. Yeah. And you know, I think one of the things I was reminded of by someone who was standing in that room when I found out the news is, you know, just take a breath. It is, as often as you've heard about other people experiencing a tragedy like this, and you have empathy for them, and you think, I never want to be there, and then you're there. All of a sudden you're there. And it's really just like you're kind of an out-of-body experience. You're going through the motions of life. You realize that the world is going on around you, but you can't quite grasp hold of any meaning at that time. You feel hopeless.
Yeah, it's sort of like watching a movie, right? It's like somebody else's story, but you're in it and you're watching it all unfold, and it's so surreal, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, that's a good word for it.
Yeah, it really is. So what helped you get through those first days or the weeks as a family to just not be prepared for something you can't possibly prepare for? What are some things that you did as a family or someone else did to help you?
So as you know, you were there. You were there from the first minute of our family finding out this information. And that was, I keep trying to figure out how we would have navigated the really early steps that we needed to take without some guidance in that regard. And what I mean by that is working with the police and law enforcement up in the UP and the medical examiner and those types of things. But then over and above that, just the explanations about the fact that what we were feeling was a normal way to respond to something that's indescribable.
So it helped to have someone there even on the onset, because I think sometimes people and friends feel like, I don't want to go there, this is a family private time. But was it helpful to have your family and friends show up immediately after? I mean, not 100 people, but what did some people do that was helpful?
I really think it's just being there and not trying to rush in and not trying to say, oh, how could this have happened? Whose fault is this? What single event must have triggered this? And I have a favorite saying that I refer to is we always look for that single thing. I've learned since that it's not a single event or interaction that causes someone to take their own life. I compare it to saying which cheeseburger caused the heart attack. Mm-hmm. It's an accumulation of a lot of things, genetics, brain chemistry, and your life experiences.
Yeah, it's sort of that perfect storm, isn't it? It's like for that cheeseburger, it wasn't that one, but it was all the other habits and possibly generics and lifestyle that combined. And I think when families come together and friends, sometimes they're trying to figure out as much as you are. So remember that analogy I did, it's this 1,000-piece puzzle.
Yes.
Right? And then when someone delivers this news or you experience it, it's like we start to put those pieces together and we want it to make sense. And it can come across as accusing for families, like you're trying to blame this last thing or the last thing I said or the last thing that was done. And so from the get-go, I think there's things that people say or do that they have good intentions.
Sure.
Because no one could possibly want to hurt you more than you're hurting. So what you just said is sitting in silence, just being a listener, coming in and just being present is helpful. What is something, because sometimes sitting around a support group, they'll talk about someone had good intentions, but what came out of their mouth was very hurtful. What were some of those things that you've been familiar with, either said to you or maybe you've heard? Because I don't think friends and family ever want to hurt us. So I think giving them permission to say and do things and even helping them understand what's helpful. So good intentions, but not always
But the wrong words, maybe? Yeah. I think the thing that hit me the hardest was when someone suggested to me that it was a very conscious choice on my nephew's part. And that somehow it was a kind of a flaw in that regard. That person didn't say that exactly, but that's how at the time I perceived it.
Yeah, that could be really hurtful because we try and teach people that suicide isn't really a choice, it's a response.
Yes.
And I don't think anyone would choose to hurt us people left behind. Like that's not the intention. And I feel like when we think about it as a response, it takes away that space of them doing it to intentionally hurt anyone. So I think there's just that language shift that we're using. When we think about good intention of people saying, wow, you're so strong, wow, you're handling all this, and the mom's doing so great, you talk about it just kind of, you're just numb, you're going through the motions. So people oftentimes call and say, I'm really worried about the mom or the dad or the wife. It's like they're not acknowledging it and they don't believe it and they're so strong. And then the next person calls and it's like, I can't get the mom out of bed and we're really scared. She keeps crying and we need to get her help. We need to go to the hospital. And I think we need to respect where people are at because nobody can prepare you for this. And intellectually, we know it's grief. We can name it, but you can't really express what it feels like. And there is no normal reaction. Some people can't stop crying. Some people, they can't cry. That numbness is so surreal. Some people can't get out of bed, and some people just sleep 24/7. They don't want to get out of bed. And I think we have to respect that grief is grief, and it's individual, just like that suicide itself. And I heard Dr. Anderson from Good Morning America, I heard her speak, and she said something beautiful. She said, you just have to feel to heal. Yep. We can't go around it, we can't avoid it, but those feelings are so painful that sometimes we just want to skip over it. And it's just a journey. It's not this total phase or these steps that we talk about, the anger, blame, and guilt. But if I were to ask you, because everybody doesn't feel the same. And I think we pull out books and it's like, oh, there's anger, there's blame, there's guilt. I think it's a way to validate that if you do feel those things, that's a normal part of grief. So everyone's not going to do and feel the same. But if I were to ask you, what was your most intense or most uncomfortable emotion after Ben died by suicide? And what did you do with it?
I would say that immediately and most intensely it was hopelessness. It was hard to see a path forward. We all, of course, had incredible sadness and a lot of disbelief. But the hopelessness, I really didn't see a way out of that initially.
Oh, yeah. That to me is somebody just standing in front of you and saying, this is very painful and it's the hardest thing in your life, but together we can survive it.
Yeah.
I think that's a very powerful message that we can say. And we talked about before Ben died and after he died, and it's such a hard lesson to learn when we lose someone, isn't it? And if I were to ask you, what is something that you now know about suicide that maybe you didn't know before Ben died, because you're an educated person, you know so much, but we don't know as much as we need to know until after they died. And what is one thing that you wish that you knew then that you know now?
That it is truly not a choice, that it is a reaction to the pain, the depths of emotional pain that exist in someone who is able to really override their own neurological system in order to end their own life.
It just doesn't discriminate, does it? It's not those people, it's not the severely depressed, it's not the substance users, it's not.
No, it's the moms, it's the dads, it's the nieces and nephews who are doing so well. It's your sisters and brothers, and it's professional people with the high levels of education, and it's people who, work in a everyday type of job. There is no discrimination.
And that's really that reason we need to talk about it, right? Because if we don't talk about suicide prevention or aftercare, people suffer in silence. And when we open it up for discussion, we're almost surprised of how many people are willing to talk about it, right? So do you have a message that you really want to share with a survivor who might be new in their grief, that might be new in this journey? What message would you say to that person, whether you wish you heard it yourself and or you just want them to know as a new survivor of suicide?
I think the number one thing is that there is hope, even though it feels like there is not. The other thing, a couple of other thoughts that I have are that find the help that is helpful to you. Don't let others prescribe what your help is going to look like. My sister and I found a lot of help through the Survivors of Suicide Support Group, through the Suicide Resource and Response Network. We have found a lot of help in our friends that are just willing to just be there. They're also willing to accept the fact that, okay, maybe we don't want to go somewhere with you. We don't want to go to dinner that night because we're tired, because grief is exhausting. And so sometimes you're just getting through what you need to get through, and then you are ready for your refuge, whatever that might be for you.
So in that support group, it really gave you guys permission, it helped you understand, and I think that it's important that, and I really appreciate what you said when you said it's got to be right for you. Support group's not right for everyone. Individual counseling isn't right for everyone. Someone's faith might be helpful, might be hurtful. I really appreciate it. And almost always survivors will talk about their friends. Friends will say, what do I do? How do I help? But that message to all friends is really about just be with me. Sometimes there's no words, is there?
No. You're just sitting alongside someone and you just feel their presence and their love. Without them having to say any perfect words, because there aren't any perfect words.
So what did the support group do for you personally? We had talked earlier about meeting like people through Kevin's song. Like, what else did you take away? It's not just sharing, is it?
It's a lot more than sharing. I think it's helping us to recognize that what we're going through, no matter how different it is from someone else's, is not right or wrong. It's so I was able to connect with another aunt who had similarly lost her nephew, and had a very similar relationship with her sister that I did. And so we were able to talk about how we weren't just experiencing our own grief, but we were experiencing our family members' grief. So our parents, our other nieces and nephews, our own children who had lost a cousin, and just kind of being able to share from somebody that really has been in your shoes.
Yeah, it's sort of that understanding of, right, because parents lose a different relationship than the aunts. Yes. And I think working in this field for 32 years, I don't think people give a lot of support to the aunts, the uncles, and the friends, but you became that matriarch right away in the beginning. Yeah. I remember that, like, people look to you to be that person, to be the strength of the family. And when you talked about that word hopelessness and really helplessness, like, I'm sitting here watching my family dissolve, or, you know, my sister losing a child, and I can't fix it.
Yeah.
That to me, I don't think people understand that you have, like, you put yourself in the situation of, I have to make sure everything's done right. I have to be the one that has my head on straight.
Yeah.
But yet you lost somebody that you loved as well. And putting your own pain on hold for a little bit and feeling that much pressure. Is that?
Yes,
is
absolutely
that sort of
describes it. And I remember saying in the days after, I think you came to my sister's home and we had just a session where we talked amongst friends and shared memories of Ben. And I remember saying, I am the fixer and I can't fix this. I can fix so many other things for my family, but I couldn't fix this.
Yeah. So yeah, because you had to navigate the system with bringing your parents home from out of town, and who's going to tell them, and who's going to get Ben from out of town, and who's going to make the arrangements, and then the busyness starts, and people are calling, and calls have to be made. That's who does that job?
Right.
Like, whose role is that in the house, right? So what has your family done? We call this finding purpose for your pain, right? I've never been a strong, I don't know, I guess that comment or that quote that says everything happens for a reason. For some people that works, but for myself, it's like, there's no reason for this, right?
Yeah.
So I like the purpose for your pain. So what is something that you personally have done to find purpose for your pain and to honor Ben and who he was in life?
So, as you know, I have joined the board of directors for the Barb Smith Suicide and Resource Response Network.
We're so lucky to have you. And I'm sorry why you have to be with us, but we're so honored and blessed to have you be a voice.
And one of the other things that I did is, in something that I think helps me, I know it helps me, and I hope that it helps other people, is when we were preparing for the Walk for Hope, which is an annual event put on by the network, in which really embodies the title of the Walk for Hope. We were starting our team to honor my nephew, and it's Ben's Blue Stars is the name of the team. And so in getting prepared for that and seeing who needed their t-shirts and all of that, I started a Facebook page called Ben's Blue Stars. And then I started making it more than just about the event of the walk. I started sharing information that I found helpful about suicide, about grief and surviving the journey of grief, and about destigmatizing mental health and asking for help when you need it, and recognizing your emotions and being able to name what they are in order to be able to do something to address them if something needs to be addressed.
How many people do you have that post? Are you making it that comfortable space? Are people willing to talk about it?
People are willing to talk about it, and I think it was interesting because I'm on some other Facebook groups for things that I do, like crafting. And so there was a crafting request on one of those pages that asked for suicide prevention artwork, and so I shared my experience in a comment, and I had 3 or 4 people from that group ask me if they could join my Ben's Blue Stars group. And I've had people who say, I look at it, I read it, it means a lot to me. I might not comment and I might not share at the time, but it's been meaningful to me. And so that's been very helpful. And I feel like I have Ben's spirit behind me when I'm working on that.
So he's still sharing messages, isn't he?
Yes, yeah.
I've never asked, what is a Ben's Blue Star? Tell me where that came from.
So in the days following Ben's death, so my dad, who is a really big Willie Nelson fan.
Me too, that makes us older, right?
He referenced the Willie Nelson song, Blue Star. So this one is going to be hard for me to say without getting a little emotional, but essentially the phrase out of the song is, when you reach the heavens bright, I'll be the blue star on your right.
So that's your Ben.
So that's our Ben.
I love that. And I love that it has a meaning around hope and brightness and message and not being alone. And, you know, I worked with a mom yesterday, and she said, I know this sounds crazy, but it's like he lives within me now. Yep. And everywhere I go, they're there. And for survivors, I think that's so important to know that they never really leave us. They live within us.
Yep, absolutely.
And I will always remember that blue star and that message. And when we look up, sometimes we have to remember that it's not the way we want them with us. And Willie Nelson is my favorite, yes. Which makes me and your dad very old. So if you are here and there's a listener out here, whether it's through the podcast or the station, and if you're a listener or you're concerned where someone's having thoughts of suicide, what would you say to a listener who's maybe having those thoughts right now?
Don't feel guilty about having those thoughts. They come from a variety of sources, as we've just talked about, and it's not a flaw in who you are as a person. There are so many people out there that love and care for you and want you to stay. Reach out to one of them, and if one of them doesn't give you the response that you need, reach out to someone else.
I love that, because I really appreciate when you said this isn't about making you feel guilty for having thoughts. This is about, we don't have to act on those thoughts, but what we can do is we can act out by reaching out and calling a friend, a family, a coworker, or the national helpline that's going to be at the end of the screen, right, or the text line. So we want to make sure everyone has a pen and paper out, so at the end you can take this information, because we never want to lose another person. And you had talked earlier, not today, but how many people came together for Ben at the funeral. Yeah. And if he only could have seen those people, or he could have made one of those calls.
If love could have saved him, he would have lived forever. I truly believe that. And I just want to add one more thing to that. What would I say to someone who has those thoughts? And I just lost it.
Grief makes us lose a lot of things.
Yes.
We use a lot of sticky notes.
And thanks, now I remember it. Please don't feel like by reaching out, you're begging for attention in some way. I think, you know, in some of the things that I've read and some of the comments that we've shared in support group about things that aren't helpful, is that if someone is struggling, there are many people that will say, oh, gee, you're just going to have to tough it out and get over it. And that's usually coming from somebody that doesn't understand the extent of the pain. And so it's not an attention-seeking behavior to ask for help.
Yeah, it's just necessary. I mean, we're all humans, and life is hard. Life is challenging, and I think it's important to know that it's not a sign of weakness, it's not a sign of failure, but it's really that sign, not believing that people do care and want to help. So I want to really reiterate what you had just said about reaching out, asking for help, taking your pen right now and writing down that number, the 1-800-273-TALK. 1-800-273-TALK, or the text line is 741-741, and text anything you'd like, home, help, you know, I'm here, and someone will respond to you immediately. It's 24/7. Sometimes in life, we feel so much alone with our challenges. We think people don't understand. But even in sharing what you did and you're honest and really disclosing all of your thoughts, there's somebody else that has had that same journey or that same thought or emotion. So there's no aloneness in this world. And you have your website, you have is it Ben's Blue?
Ben's Blue Stars Facebook groups.
Facebook group. I'm going to join that. I think I need to join that one. But again, it's just somebody who understands. So besides some of the things we already talked about, we want our listeners to know that our website is SRRN.net, which is Suicide Resource Response Network. So SRRN.net. You can go to the website and there are some trainings. We have special events. We have some quotes, but there's a lot of information on there, whether you want to do some prevention work or you've been impacted by suicide. You can connect with us. Our phone number will also be at the bottom, the 989-781-5260. If you want someone to come and connect with your family or talk to anyone in your family, the team that was referenced through Julie was called the LOST Team, Local Outreach for Survivors of Suicide. So that's one of our programs or one of our services that we have where two people who have similar loss will talk with your family to really bring you that hope and to help you figure out where do you go from here. We have an ongoing support group that meets twice a month. So if you call our number again, we can let you know where that's at, the time that it is, and we have even worked through virtual, getting through COVID, because we didn't want our survivors to be left alone. So we have the ongoing support group. We have the phone line where I can just spend some time on the phone with you and or other people who are trained as well. We also we have a training network, so we offer trainings, Safe Talk, Assist, awareness trainings. For those, again, you can look at our website, but we need to empower people. We need, as Julie said, she wished she would have known some of the things prior to Ben's death, and these are some of the things that we want to teach. We want to go upstream. We want people to know that there are some things that we can do to prevent, and if you're willing to sign up for a training, host a training, call our phone number, and we will help coordinate those efforts or let you know where those trainings are. I'm actually really excited to tell you that on November 20th, which is National Survivors of Suicide Day, it's always the Saturday before Thanksgiving, we're hosting an event. I think this is our 16th annual event, but at Bavarian Lodge, it's for anyone who's been impacted by suicide, and we do have limited numbers of people that'll come. We are bringing our keynote speaker is going to be Dr. Frank Campbell. We gift a luncheon, we have art therapy, some music, and a way to connect with others who have been impacted by suicide. So we do want you to join us. That should be up and running soon. You can also, just call us if you have any questions, any concerns, or you just need some information. Call our network, and we want you to know you're not alone. There are people that care and are willing to help. Thank you for listening today, and we hope to hear from you soon.